Hey, welcome back to Happy Hour here on the Craft Beer Runner. Today we have my friend Pete on. Pete is a chemical engineer who works in food process engineering. Pete, welcome to the channel. Thanks for coming on today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. How you doing?
I'm good. It's Thursday night. I know Pete from the Ginger Runner YouTube channel Patreon page, where we do a Thursday night trivia night from all around the world. I think the trivia host is in Canada. We have someone in Australia. We have someone in Alaska, and then all across the U.S. as well. So I got to know Pete that way. He made some comments about beer and alcohol and jokes, and I was like, this is my kind of guy. So welcome, Pete. What are you drinking today?
Thank you. I am right now. I'm working on a Moat Mountain Iron Mike Pale Ale. It's what is it? A 5.6. I don't know much about it. This is actually my first time having it, and it's pretty good. It clean, not too much aroma, but not any horrible aftertaste, and that's a very nice change of pace in the Northeast.
A good beer for 9 p.m. your time.
Exactly.
And then I have a Modern Times Alien Radio. It's a hazy double. Modern Times is down in San Diego. They have tap rooms throughout California. They make some good beer. They're employee owned, which is great, and their tap rooms have some great food as well. So let me pour this real quick. You got a head start on me.
Yep.
I'll be disappointed in myself. I'm not using my IPA glassware today, but cheers, Pete. Thanks for coming on. So, Pete, what got you into chemical engineering? For myself, I came from high school where most people didn't get into STEM. I have a civil engineering degree. I went to more of a liberal arts or humanities-based high school. So what got you into engineering?
Well, it was a long and sordid road. I actually started studying fire protection engineering right out of high school. Wasn't necessarily my thing, and definitely was the wrong school for me. I was at a 50,000 student school, and that's just not my jam. I should have taken some notes from my sisters, both also engineers, both went to 3,000 student schools. So I had dropped out. I was working for a number of years, and I realized that I was doing the work of an engineer. I was actually working for a railroad. I was doing the work of an engineer, but not being paid like one. So I was like, I actually kind of want that degree. And so I went and I got an associate's degree in engineering science. And to be honest with you, it was as simple as my decision to go into chemical engineering was as simple as my chemistry classes were the most interesting to me. My one sister has a chemical engineering degree. My brother-in-law has a chemical engineering degree, and then my oldest sister is a computer science and engineering person. And so I knew kind of what they were doing, and I wasn't really on the radar. Brewing very much so was. I had started home brewing by this point, and I'd been doing it for quite a while and doing quite a bit of it. But I transferred up to Clarkson and started doing chemi, and boy, am I glad I did. It was fascinating. It was extraordinarily difficult. But I loved every minute of my time there and that major. And then so, a while after I had a small stint in defense that we don't need to talk about. And and then I got into food process via a consulting company, actually.
So did you know that was a possible path to go from chemical engineering to food process engineering, or was that just happen by the consulting company?
Only to an extent. I didn't necessarily see that link until my friends started getting jobs at Procter and Gamble. Really, I had several friends wind up at P&G. I was like, oh, there's this whole thing called consumer packaged goods, and I was like, well, shampoo and toothpaste are boring, but beer is fun. And so I started in the consulting company and eventually moved to at the time, growing coffee company, let's just call it that. That is no longer just a coffee company. And I spent a substantial amount of time in research and development for them doing nothing having to do with coffee. I spent, 6 years there and never touched coffee. And the majority of that was actually brewing. And it led to some neat advances and to some changes in the business and stuff like that. But, I got to do some really cool stuff. We built out a lab where, we were doing everything very small batch. I mean, our brew house we had a 2.5 gallon brew house. We were in the middle of building it up to a 5 gallon brew house when things changed. And then we had some of the most advanced cellaring and filtration technologies you could find in the world.
And you're currently doing consulting, correct?
So I'm back in the consulting world now, and doing work for a couple of players in the brewing and distilled spirit space.
So you were saying to me earlier that your role. So when you think of food process engineering, I think. Well, first I was thinking that you were doing the food science part of it, but you're doing a lot of the build out, like how to create what do you need to do a brewery, correct?
Well, yeah. So there's multiple stages when you look at the growth. There's the actual product development. The food science, make it on a lab bench, make it a gallon at a time, or even a liter at a time. If you go look at I know VLB has one of these in Berlin. They have a rack of mini fermenters that just goes across a bench, and so you do, a 10-liter brew, and then you could split it across 12 or 13 different fermenters to change everything in your cellaring technique. And so we would take it from that lab scale. There's the what's called process development, which is you take it from the lab scale and you figure out how to make it at scale. And then you figure out how to test it at scale and qualify that you're actually making the same stuff that you made in the lab. And then there's the actual engineering where you're designing the building, you're designing the equipment, you're figuring out how all the equipment actually works together and integrates with each other. And you turn into a glorified plumber and you learn a whole lot about stainless steel. And so I've actually, in my career, I've touched every part of that.
Did this, because you said you were a home brewer before you even started your degree, has that knowledge of homebrewing helped in your career, or has what you're doing now actually kind of increased your knowledge of homebrewing?
It's what I've been doing now has dramatically increased my knowledge of homebrewing. The one hard part is you become a spoiled brat. Once you get temperature control in your fermenters and in your cellar, you never want to go back to putting a bucket in the closet. You just can't do it. And so I'm currently not brewing. I just moved into this house and I've got a basement finally and space and now I just need to save up last time I scoped it out, what I want to do is about $6,000 for a brewery. For a 2.5 gallon brewery. And almost all of that money is on, it's on the cold block side. And the big thing that I learned when I started working at the bigger in the research and bigger industrial scale is, when you're a home brewer and when you're a smaller scale brewer, you focus so much on what you're doing in the brew house, your mash profile, your hop additions, what type of hops you're using and all that stuff. And when it comes down to making a good beer, that is so secondary to your sanitation and your oxygen management and your haze management on the cold block side.
I was telling you last week that I was at my friend's Kevin's house in his backyard. He was doing brewing there, and you're talking about going from temperature control to old school. He used to own a brewery for 5-6 years here in Seattle, and he sold that brewery, and he's back to old-fashioned temperature control. And we were doing everything outside, which kind of helped with some things and kind of hurt with other things. But it was my first experience watching a homebrew, and it was great knowledge. It was a fun experience for sure.
The brew itself, you can do that outside. It's what you do it's what do you do once you shut off that burner. That's where the hard part stops. So at Knockout and Whirlpool, from there to getting your temperatures right, pitch the yeast, and then managing the temperatures through the whole fermentation, making sure everything stays clean through that whole thing, and then figuring out how to get it out of that fermenter and into some sort of serving vessel without oxidizing the crap out of it. And it's hard, and probably 70% of the craft breweries in this country fail at that. So my learning on the cold side of the brewing process really helped my homebrew. But it also made me a spoiled brat now on refrigerators and stainless steel everything. And
So have you drawn up your system that you want? You said it was 6K.
I don't know if I've got drawings of it anymore. That was a 2-burner, fully PID controller controlled electric. Actually, the 6K may have been for a 5-gallon brewery. I think that was for a 5-gallon. But it was fully temperature controlled, recirculating infusion mash system. So I could do step mashing in it. And then I would have more than one refrigerator to handle my fermenters. They make jacketed systems for 5-gallon, and they're really expensive, and you can solve these problems with refrigerators and a good thermostat.
Given your background working for the coffee company, I'm not going to say which one, and also just in food process engineering, I mean, there's systems out there right now that kind of are like helping people that don't know anything about home brewing do like these automated stuff. I think actually the company you used to work for now makes one, but the companies like Picobrew. Have you worked with any of this stuff? Have you experimented with any of these things? Like, what are your thoughts on some of these systems?
So I have a lot of experience with the Picobrew. I can tell you that much. I have used a Picobrew to failure, and it takes quite a bit. They're cool because it's when you are busy with stuff, being able to, as long as you get your recipes right, you can fire and forget, and it'll come out consistent every time. It's pretty impressive. The challenge that I saw with the Picobrew was actually cleanability. Now, I mean, it's hot side, so it's not as important, but it's really tough to get that thing clean.
Right.
But I did get to use Picobrew quite a bit.
I mean, I guess one of the upsides of that is it's good like gateway for people that don't know too much about brewing. But I think for a lot of the home brewers, a lot of them do it because they love the experimentation. They love the chemistry. They love a lot of aspects that are kind of like bastardized by doing a Picobrew. But I think it's a good gateway for someone that like has a little bit of interest, wants to see, I'm making my own beer, and then that might pique their interest in buying a book and reading and learning what goes into actual brewing, and especially the sanitation side. And then maybe eventually buy a system or build a system.
The Pico, that they had some stuff where you could basically load a profile and go. And I know that they had, I don't know where they are with it now, but they were working on something where you would actually be able to put in a thing that came basically preloaded with all the hops and the malt and everything like that. And you'd literally just push a button and it would go. The original Picobrew, it was fully programmable. So you had infinite control over your mash profile. That's actually one of the main reasons we used it, is because it was a real easy way to step mash. And step mashing manually is very, very difficult. Without using decoction, and getting decoction right at such a small scale is really tough. But it's a good way in. What I liked about that control is you could really dial in your brew process. The challenge with it becomes people become so focused on that brew process, they forget all of the actually important stuff that happens afterwards.
And you said you recently moved to New Hampshire, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How long you been in New Hampshire?
3 months, 2 months.
Have you had a chance yet to check out the beer scene yet?
Well, no, I've been traveling for work a lot, and therefore I get to spend all of my time at home. Um, so I haven't been out much. I've been, I've been finding the local beers that are available, at stores and trying some. There's a great brewery in Concord, Concord Craft Brewing Company. That's fantastic. There's Great North in Manchester, and then Moats over in North Conway. So, New Hampshire, and comes from a guy who used to live in Vermont, so I'm a little spoiled, and who lived in New York prior to that, so I was really spoiled. I think New Hampshire's beer scene is still starting to develop, and I from what I've been figuring out now is it feels like Vermont was 5 years ago.
The thing is, I honestly don't know anything about New Hampshire. Like, I have zero knowledge of the state. I don't even know the name of the state.
Really nice mountains.
But so like I don't know like the demographics of the state. I don't know if people under the age of 45, what they would do for work if they lived out there. I have no idea what the main industries are around New Hampshire. So I have like, in my mind, I don't know like what would be driving a craft beer scene there.
Well, so New Hampshire, the southern half of the state is commutable distance to Boston.
Okay.
So where I live in Concord, I live just outside of Concord, which is the capital. I'm an hour and 5 minutes from downtown Boston if there's no traffic, which means 4 hours on a regular day. But it becomes the access to industry is plenty in Massachusetts, and it's made its way up. There's a ton of stuff in Nashua, in Merrimack, and then in Manchester and Concord. There's a lot of work going on. As you get further north, you start getting more into the woods, and it becomes a little more rural. But from Nashua to Concord, I'm in a small town. It's not like I live in the suburbs, but I'm only an hour from Boston.
Well, I mean, if you said it's what the Vermont was 5 years ago, that means stick around 5 years, you're going to be in for some good beer, right?
There's already good beer. There's already a couple of breweries that have been popping up that I'm finding that I know weren't here a few years ago that are really making some good stuff. It's from what I found, it's pretty still IPA centric. And Vermont is starting to crack that nut between Foam and Hill Farmstead and a few other guys. That you're starting to see. Well, I should say, in the big one, Von Trapp Brewing, the Trapp family they just about quintupled the size of their brewery a few years ago, and they're making some phenomenal continental lagers out of there, and so there's a bit more diversity in the beer you can get in Vermont. It's starting to feel more like New York, where New York you can find anything if you know where to look. New Hampshire's a little more IPA centric, but I think it's changing.
Awesome. Let me transition over to the 4-pack questions for you, just so we all get to know you a little better.
Sure.
Pete, what is your memory of your first good beer experience?
It was at a bar in Maryland. I will not tell you what my age was. I'm sure I was over 21. I guarantee you, of course. And as they were going around the table ordering, everybody was getting their whatever light. I don't even remember what they were. And I just ordered a black and tan. So, just good old Guinness on Bass. And both of which are still really good beers this day and age. And I've got a soft spot for Guinness Draft and always will. And so I had it and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I enjoy. This is something that I could get used to. And so my first real beer was a black and tan.
Yeah. I think most people don't get into good beers that early. I think it's probably mid to late 20s, if not early 30s, before they actually have something that's not a macro of sorts, or just American lager, I should say. What are your favorite styles of beer?
So as a brewer, the Helles Lager holds a special place in my heart because it's so freaking hard to make, and when you get it right, it is so amazing. It's very delicate. You have to really just getting your DMS levels right in it is just really hard. So it's a great challenge. I've been working on it for over a decade and still don't feel like I have it right. And it's absolutely delicious. So Helles is my favorite style. I can be a sucker for milkshake New England IPAs though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're so close to Boston, so
yeah. And when I was out at Davis, UC Davis for a week for some training a few years back, and we, as the whole class, we basically stayed as a cohort. We would leave the classroom and then wind up in the bars in Davis, and we basically made a pact to drink only sours that entire trip, and we drank almost entirely sours for an entire week. I had some of the best beer of my life that week, and my stomach was just so unhappy with me. So I love sours. Sours don't love me back.
It's funny. My friend that's in that area, in the Sacramento metropolitan area, he is not a fan of sours.
Oh yeah, that's the wrong place to be. Yeah, Northern California is they do sours there, and they're very good at them.
Oh yeah, no, we have a couple places up here that do some great sours, and actually one of my favorite places in Cleveland, Ohio. They make some killer sours there.
Where in Cleveland?
It's called Bottle House. They have a location in Lakewood and in Cleveland Heights.
Next time through there, I make my way to Cleveland every now and then. Next time I'm through there, I'll check it out.
Yeah, they do. They do kettle sours. They do meads, and they do IPAs. That's all they do. Those are the three styles.
Nice.
But they have like five
There's a
varieties.
great little sour brewery. Oh, nice. There's a great little sour brewery in Brattleboro, Vermont called Hermit Thrush. They're doing some really special stuff as well. They're more on the kettle sour side. I don't know if they're going into the barrel side much at all.
So next up is inside. I mean, you haven't explored too much. You've checked out the cans. What's been your favorite brewery so far in New Hampshire?
Either Concord Craft Brewing or Great North in Manchester. Great North has a really, really solid IPA. Not a super hazy, juicy IPA, a bit more traditional Eastern, but a big one at 7%. And they also have a fantastic pale ale. Although I'm thoroughly enjoying Moat as well.
And you've been around. You mentioned going to school in New York, living in Vermont, taking classes at UC Davis. Outside of New Hampshire, what's been two of your favorite breweries?
How to narrow it down. In Vermont, my big ones are Von Trapp Brewing, Lost Nation, and Rock Art. New York, it's Lake Placid Pub and Brewery. Those guys, they're one of the OG New York craft breweries. They've been doing this for a long time. They've kept it at pub scale. They work with FX Matt for their bottling and stuff. And man, Ubu is just amazing. And then getting out to the broader scene, there's probably the Rare Barrel in Berkeley, California. They actually don't brew. They're entirely a barrel house. And I got very fortunate while I was out in California to go to spend some time with the Rare Barrel. That stuff's real. That's my sour cake.
When you said when COVID's over and you come up to Seattle, if you want some sours, I'll take you to Urban Family and have a few other nice places up. If you go to Portland, I believe it's Cascadia Brewing. It does the kettle sours and barrel sours, and so
nice.
There's a few places to explore up here.
I've got a few excuses to get to the Northwest, so it's going to happen once we can travel again.
Yeah, for sure. Pete, thank you so much for coming on today. Appreciate the time. I'll see you in a few minutes over at Trivia. Everyone, if you like this video, please subscribe to this channel. And Pete, cheers.
Cheers.